Everyone, and it's so good to see you finally arrive, Commissioner Leviton. I'm kidding because Susan was the first one here today, and she just stepped out of the room. Good afternoon, everyone. This is Judge Andre Davis, Chair of the Commission, and I'm so pleased to see everyone in the room and to welcome those, I think, 9 of you or thereabouts who have joined us through the technology that's available. Let me start by thanking the Maryland Judiciary and Judge Weathersby, our connection that has enabled us to meet in this very, very fine space this afternoon. Welcome, Mr. Secretary. So we'll start with what we all have been waiting for, and that is to meet in the flesh our new director, Suki McMahon, whom most of you, I think, have met already, at least virtually. And I'll give her an opportunity to introduce herself.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I've been making my rounds. If we haven't met yet, we will in short order. I am Suki McMahon. I'm so pleased to be here. Just real quick about myself. I most recently came from JLUSA, which is a national nonprofit that's based out of New York. It was founded and it still is led by folks who are directly impacted by the criminal legal system. I was their executive strategic director. I led their national policy table. Before that, I was at the Columbia University Justice Lab, which was co-founded by our own Vinnie Schiraldi. I didn't have the pleasure of working under the secretary, but I was the manager of the roundtables on the future of justice policy. And then I was the director of the Collaborative on Reckoning and Justice. It was my deep, deep pleasure to run tables very similar to this for many, many years. And I look forward to bringing that experience to this commission. So it's nice to meet you all. Look forward to working with you.
Thank you, Suki. And I'm sure you know, if only by the email, the torrent of email and information that we've been getting from Suki, but I can assure you in other ways as well. She truly has hit the ground running and has joined the great team that we are beneficiaries of as commissioners. Welcome. I will entertain, if appropriate, a motion from a commissioner to approve the minutes of our last meeting held on April 10th. 2025. The minutes were distributed to you by email, and I have reviewed them, and I find no changes or revisions are necessary. But if there are any from anyone else, be glad to entertain that. Otherwise, do I hear a motion? Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Susan. Having been moved and second, any discussion? There being none. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? The minutes will stand approved. Thank you very much. And again, I want to thank Ainsley and the staff for a tremendous job on the minutes that we've come to expect and never be disappointed with. Thank you. With that, as I promised, as we promised at the last meeting, we're going to have a brief legislative update. Not sure if there was anything of particular importance to the commission's work or related areas, but if there was, Bethany will tell us right now.
Thank you, Judge, and good afternoon, everyone. So I'm going to give an overview of kind of youth-related legislative action this year in the session that ended last month. So over the past few years, as you all know, because some of that legislation created this commission, there has been almost every year some set or some large legislative package focused on youth in particular. So we've had moments of like sweeping reform, followed by periods of recalibration or revisiting past reforms. And this session was a little bit different. There were a lot of bills introduced related to youth, but only 2 passed ultimately, 2 that I think are particular interest to this commission. And this could suggest, and I hesitate to draw any conclusions, but it could suggest a desire among the legislature to pause and reflect and see how some of these reforms are going, to wait for some data. it could have also been that the focus was elsewhere. This was a big year for the budget. So that was what, if for those of you that were in Annapolis, that kind of controlled and overshadowed everything else. So it could be a few things, but things to keep in mind as we think about recommendations that this commission may put forward in the future. So starting with the two that did pass, we have House Bill 814, which requires DJS to publish an annual report detailing its efforts to promote pre-delinquent programs, including youth service bureaus. And we have a representative of youth service bureaus, on our commission in Liz Park, and they are basically community-based entities that provide services to kids at the county level. Also passed this year was House Bill 197, which requires the Department of Education to develop a plan for establishing restorative justice programs in schools by July 1st, 2026. It also requires any local Board of Education that seeks to implement restorative justice programs to abide by the state plan promulgated by MSDE. So the bigger news, as I mentioned, is the bills that did not pass this section. And so there were a few bills, and I'm going to talk about them by theme as I organize them. So the first set of bills is about jurisdiction, penalties, and detention. Senate Bill 422 would have limited the number of offenses that required direct charging of youth in the adult system. It would have kept in place the judicial waiver, but that bill did not move this session. We also had Senate Bill 827, one of the House side, and I didn't write that down, but the House version of the bill was sponsored by Delegate Bartlett, who is a member of this commission. And among other things, it would have prohibited restrictive housing for youth and would have prohibited the detention of youth in adult facilities. Senate Bill 75 would have required probation for certain crimes where a youth was not otherwise sentenced to detention, and would have also required parental participation in treatment. House Bill 441 would have allowed youth convicted as adults to be resentenced in juvenile court if the court determines that the crime for which they were convicted was committed against someone who had victimized them in, I think, the 3 months preceding the crime. There were a couple bills this session kind of revisiting the reform made in 2022 around interrogation of youth. There was a bill, House Bill 165, that would have created a rebuttable presumption that a youth statement during an interrogation was involuntary and inadmissible if false information was used to obtain it. Senate Bill 531 would have amended the Custodial Interrogation Protection Act to allow a parent to waive a youth's right to attorney consultation during interrogation. There were quite a few bills related to school safety and reporting reportable offenses. So there were several bills that would have barred students from attending school if they were charged or in some cases suspected of violent crime. There were also two bills, House Bill 620 and Senate Bill 386, that would have changed the definition of a school reportable offense. And House Bill 627 would have limited criminal charges for school-based behavior. There were also bills, House Bill 638 and House Bill 952, that would have expanded the juvenile sex offense registry requirements. And that's the end of my list. So again, there was a lot of interest in doing some legislative moves this session around youth. Only two went through. I think we can, at least from the Youth Services Bureau report, that could be useful information for our commission. But we will continue to watch and continue the work that we're doing here.
Any questions or comments?
If I could, Mr. Chair, this is Scott Phillips. I want to thank Brittany. That was an excellent report, and your initial comments, I think, were on point in terms of the mood and the mode of legislation regarding juvenile justice in this year's session. So I just want to commend her. That was a very good overview.
Thank you, Delegate.
Anyone else? Any questions? Yes, Mr. Secretary.
I would just say the energy behind the auto waiver bill was different this year. On the Senate side, it was.
Can you all hear?
Oh, should I get a?
it would be helpful to, yeah, get a little louder.
No, it's at the end. Hello?
Great, great.
I guess I'd say the energy behind the auto waiver reform bill that Senator Smith authored and was also co-authored on the House was a little different than it had been in years past. It was, first of all, the chair of the committee, so that, has heft to it. I think we had a dozen judges, including 2 prior chief judges, write in support of it. I think you did, Judge. The Black Caucus was pretty strong behind it, and the Maryland Equitable Justice Coalition Collaborative, which was the Attorney General and the Public Defender. So that just felt like a different bunch of wind behind it. It still didn't come out of, didn't get voted on in committee, which doesn't mean it wouldn't have passed. It just meant it never was put forward for a vote. So I know that that's something that's been talked about a lot in the subcommittees, and might be an area where we could provide some information that was helpful.
Do you anticipate it might come back, or you, Delegate Phillips, anticipate that it might come back next year?
Sorry, Judge, I was on mute. Yes, I do. I think both the advocacy community and inside of the legislature, there are a number of individuals that believe about that strongly. So I say yes.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay. Let's move forward with the agenda, and we look forward to hearing updates from our various work groups, all of which I know have been very hard at work. Why don't we start with fatality review? If there's anything to report. Judge, you want to?
Speak loudly,
Yes, thank you.
or I'll get a mic. So the Fatality Review Committee, we've been working hard in creating or recreating the review guidelines. Thank you, Ainsley, for helping, and Carlotta, who is the co-chair. We realized in reviewing the child fatality review guidelines that were out of the State Advisory Board, which was a different statute with a different purpose and a different really outcome. It was geared towards advising the secretary, and this is advising the governor and getting some different type of information. But in any event, the guidelines need to be recreated, and we've been working hard on doing that. So I feel like we're behind to some extent, but it has been a lot of work to review the statute and the guidelines and to create all the confidentiality documents that are required in order to review these type of cases. So we're still working on that. We're waiting to hear back from the department actually with what they say about our revisions. And then we have our first meeting next week, I believe.
Excellent.
Mhm.
Great. Mr. Secretary,
I'm gonna move buttons.
good idea. Good idea.
Judge, first of all, if there's any delays, let me know. If and I should notice, but I don't. Is this reviews only of youth in our care who are killed or victims of homicides, or also perpetrators or alleged perpetrators?
Both.
It's both. Thanks.
And not alleged. I think it's only for
Only
those
when
that
they're
are found
adjudicated?
to have
Okay.
be responsible for the death.
So that would be probably
After.
almost never happens the year it occurs. So it generally would be whenever, like if it occurred 2 years ago and the conviction or adjudication occurred this year, you'd review it. Okay, thanks.
That's right.
Okay. Any other questions or comments for that work group? All right. Can we move to the prevention work group? Microphone, please.
Aaron has a job here to do.
You got it.
He's the
Dr.
official
Sisson.
mic passer. You won't sit there next time. The prevention work group had a presentation of the youth behavior risk factor survey. My understanding is it was well attended. I personally was in Buenos Aires and missed it. Sorry. But there was a good number of public people, like the non-commissioners, that attended and participated and asked a lot of questions. And then we met again, as co-chairs, we met with Suki on Monday to bring her up to speed and start charting our path forward.
Can you say a little more about the non-commissioned members who?
Bethany or Ainsley, do you want to share?
I'm also here virtually.
Aubrey's here, yay, because she was actually there.
Yes. So we had a number of folks from the governor's office on children that were present. A number of folks in the education space that were also there. Our presenters were Chief Epidemiologist Nicard Haynes and Director Dana Moncrief. And a lot of the questions were really focusing on like the mental health pieces and ways in which we can really look to providing supports even upstream around um, like those experiences in school, how to provide supports around the social emotional experience of youth. And also we really kind of dug in, and Delegate Bartlett was there too. She can definitely weigh in, but we dug in a lot about like what the questions were in that survey, and explored a little bit different ways we could like try to see if there are specific questions we as a commission might want to put forward to help gain some more insight for the youth that we're really focusing in on. So.
Go ahead, Ben.
And just one thing that you raised, and I'm glad you raised that, because what we're trying to do as we go along is there's people to the table as we can. So we did, and I don't even know that I shared this with you, so that's my oversight. We've invited the Governor's Office for Children to participate on the prevention work group and rehabilitation services work group. And they won't be, I wouldn't even call them ex officio members, but I just wanted them to be hearing what the conversation is. And eventually they'll come to present to the commission, and they'll have a good idea of what we've been looking at and thinking about, and can also be working with us. So Suki, along with some folks from the DHS team, the Governor's Office for Children, and DJS as well, separately we'll start meeting together to talk about, improving interagency coordination. So in an effort to have kind of everybody in all the same rooms that are talking about similar things, you may see GOC or MSDE or kind of other members from agencies represented here, just to make sure that everybody who's working on this has full and complete information.
Yeah, I would say in general, there's just a lot of interest in the prevention work, and there's just getting a handle on what is already out there, trying to identify what the social safety net for our children is, and where the holes and the gaps are. It's kind of like our first order of business, and just trying to map the services that are already available and how you access them.
Well, my guess is that all of us would applaud any attempt to reduce the siloing that we know is out there with regard to services for youth. So sounds like a great development. Any other questions for this work group or observations? Thank you very much, Aubrey. We'll move on to the Juvenile Justice Processes and Coordination work group. Susan, you have the talking stick. I think it is.
Hello, folks. So, we've been working on automatic waiver, and you know that the last time Vera also instituted the commission, they worked on it, but they weren't able to get all the data from the courts. And so we have really made an effort to try to get all the information that we possibly can. The coordinating has been so helpful because now we're trying to develop an MOU with the courts, trying to get all that data. Hopefully, we should have it by the fall, maybe. And then we're looking to see if we could make findings or recommendations. In the meantime, we've really been digging down into the process. And that has been very interesting. And I really want to thank Jenny Egan. She spoke to us, and already Juvenile Services is doing lots of things on their end to speed up the process. You know, the horrible situation is that if you start in the adult system, you average 190 days from arrest to transfer hearing. And if you start in the juvenile system, it's 58 days. So, I mean, the amount of money that we're wasting on keeping kids in detention, we could provide a really rich, like Thrive model or Roca model of really total wraparound services, getting at, you know, what the kids need, what their family needs. And instead we're spending this money in just detention. They're not getting any services. And the other thing that we found now is that the kids, because they hate being in adult jail, they're taking a plea. So they basically are pleading to an adult charge. They get time served, they get out. No services have been provided to these kids, so the community is not any safer than before the entire process. And we've just spent an enormous amount of money with no outcomes. So we're really trying to look at that and see, you know, this has to be changed, because I don't, you know, I think that the public feels with automatic transfer that it's making it safer. And what we're really finding is it's the exact opposite. It's not making it safer, because the money, they're not getting any services whatsoever. The other thing that we were talking about is we met with Jenny Crable. She's the director of children and youth from GOCAP. And of course, Maryland leads the nation as the worst in regard to compliance with the federal law, because we have so many kids in adult prisons. And so because of that, we're going to lose money, and most of the money that we get from the federal government, we're going to have to use on compliance. And that's not going to be for a lot of the rehabilitative services that we much prefer to use. So that is really a big problem. I think in Baltimore City, the jail is trying to make a separate booking areas.
The jail has its own, it's a kid's jail. I mean, so that, I think that's the one place that we're in total compliance.
Where
It's
they,
an adult jail, but it's only for
kids. So, you know, that is going to help. But it's really, a complicated thing because you got 24 jurisdictions, everybody does their own thing. Some have, it's a major problem. So we were uncovering a lot of things, and we're looking forward to now really, working together with the full commission to really come up with good resolutions that will protect the public. Because I mean, when I talk to legislators, they say their constituents, the main concern is safety. And we have to be very aware of how we ensure people that anything we do is also going to improve safety. And so I think we're, moving along. It's just onion, and each layer you peel, you find something else. But it's been very helpful.
Thank you, Susan. Yes, Mr. Secretary.
Just a couple of thoughts about what Susan said. One is, I think our report's due out in October, the whole commission's report, right? So I think you were saying we should have, that's where the recommendation would, right. Good, because I think this is going to be one that is going to need some discussion here. I don't think it's a slam dunk one way or the other. The case processing issues were surprising, as Jenny has been revealing them to us, and Judge Bloomquist has become very interested in the judicial side of that. We're only focusing on the side that we control, and there's plenty of problems on our end, but there's also how, when the judge orders it, how long does it take for the clerk to get it to us? There's a whole bunch of that kind of stuff. And my hope is to meet with the Administrative Office of the Courts through Judge Tucker's committee. Do you also chair a
I chair
committee?
the delinquency subcommittee from the juvenile law committee.
And what does Judge Tucker chair?
The juvenile law committee on behalf
I
of the
see.
judiciary.
So I suspect they'll be asking you, because I've spoken to Lou and Rich about that at the Administrative Office of Courts and Judge Tucker at some conference in Omaha, specifically about this, the TOJ delays, and they seemed interested in having a follow-up conversation. So,
Absolutely.
yeah. And I don't think, it's one of those areas where I don't think anybody's an intentional bad actor. I think, unfortunately, poor kids of color, their days don't maybe count as much as middle-class kids, right? Middle-class white kids. And so a lot of them just sit around. But we can fix that. That's on us. And I think with data and determination, and it's not you couched it in public safety, which there's a public safety element to it, but some of it is just getting to where we're going in the end faster. And that's not particularly ideological. So I hope that that's an area that we can, plow some ground in the court with the courts and state's attorneys and defense bar, and also might be good to show up in the report.
Yeah. Well, that'll be a focus for sure. Thank you, Susan. Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Any other comments or questions? Judge?
I do have a question.
The mic is right there for you.
I'm interested in what the statistics are, and I know that you don't have what you want so far, but what are the numbers that you're talking about in terms of juveniles charged as adult being jailed pre-trial in contrary to federal law within sight and sound? The law is that a juvenile that is charged as an adult can't be housed with adults. And so in Baltimore City, as the secretary was saying, there is a jail for adult crimes that is strictly for juveniles. So in Baltimore City, it's not an issue. I'm from Howard County, which is not a large jurisdiction, but we don't have a juvenile wing in our local detention center. And so our local detention center contracts with the Department of Juvenile Services. And in that instance, the jail pays the Department of Juvenile Services to house a youth in that situation. What are the numbers of youth that are charged as adults that are being detained pretrial in an adult facility. That you're talking about is this significant issue.
I
Use the mic, please, Susan.
It's turned on.
Is it turned on?
Yeah, pull it closer, please.
Oh, okay. We will have Jenny get back because she has all of this, but she said that in fiscal year 2023, there was 1,268 violations. Maryland's violation rate is 90 per 100,000 youth, which is far above the federal threshold of 14.68 per 100,000. Most violations are because youth are booked or held in adult jails. And she did say, she talked about the sight and that provision.
Sight and sound.
Because it's supposed to be, it can't be for more than 6 hours. And there's, like, that doesn't always happen. So that counts as a violation, you know? But we will make sure that she sends to everybody exactly how because she has the breakdown of all of that.
Well, the violations obviously are one thing. You're talking about if it's in a booking situation, that can be a violation. But my question is, and maybe you don't know the answer to this yet, is on average, on a regular basis, how many kids are being held in an adult jail? And Mr. Secretary, you have no idea. Yeah, so it's tricky because we count the violations. We could get, I think we can get the number of kids. I can find that out.
Okay, that'd be great. And then also for
Can
the
I,
kids.
Judge, I will say,
Okay.
yesterday I was at a meeting with the
Yeah.
Baltimore City newly reestablished council, CJCC. Can't remember exactly what that stands for, but Criminal Justice Coordinating Council.
Right.
And they said in their 60-bed facility in Baltimore City that's not in violation,
Sure.
there were 75 kids that day, and that's not atypical.
And those kids who are being held for adult crimes but are in the Baltimore City Juvenile Justice Center, BJC, are they getting services from DJS?
No, but they do get services there. They have school, bunch of training programs. The jail has its own stuff that's run by the Department of Public Safety, so they get services there.
Through the adult system, even though it's a juvenile jail?
No, it's a adult system jail full of kids under age 18.
Right.
Or full of kids charged with
But
crimes
your
under age
agency is not able to serve them because?
18. Historically, yeah, they're in an adult jail. Yeah. Yeah. I think the big issue for us is it's automatic, and so everybody goes straight to a jail. And even though 90% of them never end up in a jail, they just start there. So it
Right.
keeps ticking these violations.
I do agree with that, and that's kind of a larger discussion about bail and bond in general. But I do see that anecdotally, I would say that that is an issue that I think really needs to be addressed.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Susan. The next work group is the Rehabilitative Services Work Group. Dr. Bessinger?
Excuse me, Judge, I have my hand up.
Oh, yes, sorry. Sorry, Sheriff.
Chief, sheriffs are
Chief.
much more hands. It's just a quick question because I'm a little confused. We don't have the numbers of how many youth or adult facilities charged as adults. We count violations to determine that. That's what I heard. And frankly, I think we could do a pretty easy job of making a number of phone calls and getting those numbers really to the minute. And so that causes me some trepidation. Plus, I want to make sure I understand the Secretary's offering regarding the Baltimore City facility. that was designated an adult facility. Now it is a juvenile facility, but we still count it as an adult facility holding juveniles charged as adults. Did I hear all that right?
That's my belief, sir. I don't run that facility, so I don't want to overstate my knowledge there. But I believe that is considered an adult facility because it's not under me, housing juveniles and not mixing them with other adults because it's only
Right.
kids under 18.
Okay. I just want to make sure I understood it. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Dr. Messenger?
Yeah, so similar to what's happening on the prevention services work group, we're trying to get the lay of the land of the types of rehabilitative services that are available to DJS involved kids in the state. To that end, we had Deputy Secretaries Gary and Levi come and talk about residential services and the Thrive Academy. Then Dr. Park, my co-chair, presented on YSBs, which seems relevant to the new legislation that was passed. And then most recently, I presented with colleagues from the Institute on evidence-based and promising practices that are available to DJS-involved youth in the state. Our next meeting is next Friday, so we'll be continuing down this path of exploring the services available for kids.
Great, thank you. Any questions for Dr. Betzinger? Okay, last but not least, public narrative.
Okay, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
So our work group, year one goal is to understand Maryland youth justice and provide answers to the question, what do we know about youth crime and about the holistic nature of juvenile justice issues? We decided that the work group's key deliverable would be a infographic with highlights, interviews, and anecdotes from children, parents, and stakeholders that detail the flow from the first encounter to reentry. And this could include graphics for social media as well. Creative visuals such as a comic book. We have an example in New York that was used to kind of explain how the system works. Also use of the Maryland specific flowchart from the Data Resource Guide to increase understanding of the workings of the juvenile justice system at all touch points. And we're primarily interested in what happens before DGS involvement and the discretionary decisions by people such as resource officers and police, and how this may also vary by jurisdiction. We have the concept and some initial resources, and the project planning phase is beginning. We'll highlight key moments or interactions in the flowchart and create and implement a timeline to capture those interviews or anecdotes. We're still looking to partner with the Vera Institute, looking to identify best practices nationally around narrative change and public education. We're looking to also talk about, and I think Nate is going to touch on this, how the recent funding cuts is impacting programs and services. And then the ongoing narratives around high-profile incidents are skewing perceptions about how much crime is actually happening. And last, for my portion, is the contradictory nature of some narratives, such as youth crime is up based on occupancy at DGS facilities, but at the same time, DGS is not doing enough. So that's just a few examples. Nate has some few things to add as well.
Thanks, Eric, and good to see everybody. We also, just to add, there have been a couple different times there have been this survey that went out about narratives that the GoCap team had put out, which has been, I think, really helpful to get a sense of what are the narratives that people are concerned about and what do we need to be working towards. So I think we've held two kind of connected pieces. One is this like public education, which I think we're seeing as our charge in a lot of ways, is all the other work groups. How are we thinking about public education related to those other work groups? How are we making sure that there's data? How are we making sure we're presenting it in ways that are helpful to people understand? So there's a case processing work group, but how do we think about ways to share information about the way that the juvenile justice system actually works that are easy for the public to understand and that can be helpful for different audiences. So we've been talking about that. I think some of the themes that are coming up today are also some of the narratives that came up in that survey that I think are really helpful. And that there's some that like linger forever, and there's others that keep coming up. And in each week that we look at the news are coming up anew. And I think we need to be thinking about what we're doing with that too. So we've been talking about that. So seeing, for example, one of the ones that people want to see, and I'm just hearing it today, just writing down myself, that the idea that sort of safety is not equal to support and growth, that safety means something different. And that came up in the survey, like the questions about accountability and how do we reframe accountability to include support and growth. We sort of heard this week in the news article that was sort of challenging the notion that young people in the system are sort of worthy of jobs, like plain and simple, worthy of jobs that pay them a wage, like that was questioned this week. That's really central to what we're like working on in this commission when we're talking about the narrative change work group and thinking about what we're doing. So I think we need to be keeping an eye on all of that too. Just to give a couple of the examples that Eric was just talking about and that came up, the idea of the comic book thing was not, these are things we're exploring as ideas, but that came from something that we saw in New York City that was a really cool project that I think made the map of how kids enter the system and how they get out, just as importantly, like very vividly in a way that kids, families, communities could understand. How does it work? How do kids go through the system and what are the ways that they move on and what are the ways they get out? And all those things being a way to just bring a lot more clarity to what's going on, because I think that we clearly don't, the public understanding of how juvenile justice works in Maryland is pretty limited. And I think that's the case almost anywhere, really. I mean, but because it's in such a hot topic here, the need to illuminate how it works from beginning to end seems really important. So we're keeping an eye on that as well.
Wow, well, thank you both for a fulsome report from that very important committee. I'm going to be curious to hear more about your engagement with the media. Editors, journalists, producers, owners. I hope that you go there, and I'm sure you will. Okay, well, thank you very much. We're going to take a break, very short break. Help yourself to refreshments outside. I will ask our panelists, which is the next part of this meeting. We have a rich panel discussion plan. If the panelists will come forward, we're going to set the panel up here and ask all the commissioners to draw as close as possible to make it a cozy session. So we'll break for 7 minutes. Sorry.
Thank you. So we're at the same university. We are. We're even in. We're in the lot. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Hi, please to meet you.
My SME.
Your
Good
go-to.
and everything. Oh, look at that, look at that.
I think we're gonna set you up right here.
Yeah.
And, okay, good. Can I get you some water?
Yeah.
I'll grab some.
That they don't understand. So when they initially built,
You're leaving us.
No, I'm just moving down. Just moving down.
This feels very, I feel like I have to press it and say, I'm going to defer to the distinguished gentleman to my right, like they do in the big, in the
You
movies.
do not have to say that, no.
Don't throw those away.
This is the one you don't go.
I
think it was that soup, there was that sausage.
I want to make sure you all have a.
Should I be sitting next?
Hey, Bill.
Should we? I don't know if
Yeah,
Carol
we're
should be
going to
here.
collect the microphone.
Okay.
Your Honor.
Great to meet you. Thank you so much for
Thank you
coming.
for your call.
Oh, yeah, that's great, great. One thing I should have said that I didn't say, we only have about 30 minutes. So I need your responses to be fairly short. Okay?
I'm good.
I'm nothing if not short.
We're going for short responses.
Hi, I'm Liz.
Hi, Liz.
Nice to meet you.
How you doing?
Crystal, big.
I like it again.
No, not that one. Let's say hi to the secretary. How you doing, sir? Good to see you.
I never gave you anything.
Oh, you know
Right
what?
back
I
with
think
yours.
over here doing it.
Oh, no. Thanks.
Very good.
We have about.
Even though crime's going down.
I'm sworn in civilian. I'm trying to civilian.
Got it? You guys need two of them.
This is nice. Hey, you.
Okay, I think we're.
Captain?
Oh, thank you.
The detector?
I think so.
And then immediately.
Yeah. I worked every day.
Oh, that's right.
So. Now.
This is pretty expensive. This is nice.
They are. Right. Yeah. No. Yeah. No.
Very cool.
Together. Shocks. And you're not getting services there at all. But. I got Well, we're trying to get a handle on the number of days that it's, but these are two different things. One, we're talking about violations, and the other, we're talking about just pretrial detention. So they are in compliance, still a long time.
need the 5-minute bell. We need the 3-minute bell.
I can start singing if you. That'll get everybody to come back.
So welcome back to the meeting. We're very fortunate this afternoon to have really 4 extraordinary, distinguished professionals who work in this space, 3 of whom are sworn law enforcement officers, 1 of whom is not. We've heard from the brain scientists, we've heard from Zero Institute, who's been working in this space and in fact specifically worked in Maryland. We've heard from the department. And so today we get to hear from first level stakeholders and interactors with our youth. The title of this panel is From First Contact to Community Connection, Law Enforcement, Youth, and the Power of Early Intervention. And I'm just so pleased that we have the opportunity to spend not enough time, frankly, with these 4 extraordinary people who are working in this space. To my immediate left is Captain Elizabeth Smith with the Anne Arundel County Police Department, a longtime law enforcement professional, working, among other things, as the commander of the Community Relations Division for Anne Arundel County Police, where she manages the Youth Diversion Program, Youth Activities Program, the Crisis Intervention Team, and school police officers. Thank you for joining us, Captain Smith. Next to Captain Smith is Detective Sergeant Amber Hafer from the Anne Arundel County Police Department. Sergeant Hafer is a assistant commander of the Criminal Investigation Division. I'm sorry, I said Anne Arundel County, Caroline County Police Department. And she's been assigned to the Criminal Investigation Division since 2018. She serves in numerous roles within the department, including child advocacy, an active participant to include Sexual Assault Response Team and Child Advocacy Center multidisciplinary team. Thank you for joining us, Sergeant Amber. Next to Sergeant Hafer is Carol Pareco of the Anne Arundel County Office of the Youth and Victim Engagement Services Unit at the Anne Arundel County Police Department. Ms. Pareco is a sociologist by training with a master's degree from the University of Maryland, Baltimore County. She has a passion for supporting youth, working to implement and oversee initiatives that aim to hold youth accountable without criminalizing their behavior. Welcome, Ms. Pareco. And then last but not least is Chief Lisa Reynolds, who's the chief of the Baltimore City Police Department Youth and Community Partnerships Unit. Chief Reynolds is a longtime collaborator in the city and state partners to address youth behavior and develop intervention strategies that offer support, services, and opportunities for both young people and community members. Welcome, Chief Reynolds. We're so pleased to have all of you with us. So they've seen the questions in advance, and I've asked them to keep their responses relatively short. It's going to be very informal, and we promise to leave time at the end for questions from the commissioners, including those of you who've joined us by Zoom. So let's start with the conversation. And the first question is to you, Captain. You got to go first. What I misplaced the question. Yeah, okay. So what kinds of activities or behaviors are precipitating, in your experience and observations, encounters with youth, and what needs are you seeing most often in those youth or in that cohort?
First, thank you all for inviting me here today. I'm actually very blessed to be here to be able to talk amongst all of you, and my fellow panelists are amazing. I would say that there's two big factors that kind of lead up to our interaction. One would be family and socioeconomic type factors, and the other one would be, I would say, mental health. Any depression, any bullying, any anti-anxiety, any ADHD, those things, those kinds of things. And then what kind of home life and the support that children get, I believe, plays a really huge role into any future interaction that the police may have.
Sergeant Hafer, what do you see?
In Caroline County, we're more so a rural community. I'm on the Eastern Shore for reference. So we see a lot of frequent runaways, mental health crises based on the socioeconomic status of the children and their home life. And more specifically from the criminal investigations perspective, I work with a lot of internet crimes against children, the ICAC task force, and the production and distribution of child pornography. I see a lot of that just because that's what I do predominantly day in and day out. So social media prevention with the children is a big thing for me.
I'm going to jump to Chief Reynolds, who can bring the Baltimore City perspective. Chief Reynolds, what do you see in your work in terms of what kinds of activities or behaviors precipitate encounters between youth and police?
Is it on? Okay.
Yes.
So, I mean, it is a different dynamic in Baltimore City, and I think, you know, I want to answer that part, but going into what it was Captain, right? What Captain was saying, in addition to those factors, there's just a dynamic, a family dynamic in the city that we're often dealing with, whether it's trauma or whether the family, there's, you know, arrest history or incarceration, death, homicides. So it adds a different layer onto that. And then into that too, I would put, you know, education, right? They need to be going to school. They need to be in school. But for most part, I think it's a youth with not a lot of things to do and out there doing things that maybe some of us did. And there's just a difference in how it's being perceived. There are a handful, and I'm not going to say, I said it the other day, I'll say it again. There is a handful, and you can use that number for what you want, of youth that are doing things that are delinquent, and they escalate in nature. But there are other youth that are just displaying, out riding scooters and leaving the scooters in the middle of the street, or down bothering people at the harbor, not assaultive, but just being disruptive. And, you know, we see it on the news and we expect that every child is going to be that person who was arrested and we saw on the news, and that's not the case, and it's unfortunate.
Staying with Baltimore City, Chief Reynolds, walk us through, if you will, briefly, the process in your jurisdiction from the initial call for service or a decision to engage with a young person to the various ways in which law enforcement gets involved early on.
So we're obviously under a consent decree. So we have to be the least restrictive as possible. We also have policies around our policy 1202, which is on the BPD transparency website, walks every officer through how to interact with youth. Baltimore City, again, is different. We have juvenile booking, which is attached to Baltimore City Juvenile Justice Center. So all requests for detention are coming down to the facility. That includes MTA police, Baltimore City School Police, Morgan, Coppin. They're all coming through if they want detention. So I think the fact that we have the ability to centralize our processes, we can better communicate with DJS. I think the communication has gotten a lot better. How we're paper referring cases, how we're again, requesting sanctions or utilizing SINs. But for the most part, because the commissioner is focused on how we're interacting with youth, we're putting out trainings. We're trying to make sure that every action or every interaction that we have is reaching the right solution. So we're not just automatically jumping to this child needs to be arrested.
Ms. Pareco, how does it work in your jurisdiction? When do you first become involved in a case or a matter or with a child?
Okay, I just want to make sure this works. Okay, thank you. So in Anne Arundel County, we have a pre-arrest diversion program called Fresh Start. So any youth who engages in an offense that rises to the level of being criminally charged, based on their prior record, they can have up to 2 prior offenses. They can be referred to our pre-arrest diversion program called Fresh Start in lieu of charging. And so what that looks like is that in the police report, in our system, they then refer the youth to Fresh Start. The youth is assigned to our unit, and then we have officers that are assigned to us that serve as case managers. And then the officers, within a week of the incident, the officer is assigned the case. They schedule a meeting with the family and the youth and have a discussion and look at the youth as a whole.
If I can interrupt, what happens between the encounter between an officer and a youth and a week later when a case manager officer is assigned to that youth? What's going on for that young person?
In between that time?
Yes.
It's going to depend. Is it a
Okay.
school-based incident and the school has disciplined them, or is it an incident out in the community? Is it an incident in which the youth also needed a mental health evaluation? Sometimes that happens as well. They could have been evaluated in that time. They may not rise to the level of an emergency evaluation, but they do need mental health services. So then we refer them directly to our crisis response system.
So that would be an encounter with an acutely
It could
disturbed young person, or?
No, and I wouldn't put it that way.
And I don't mean to put words in your mouth. I'm not
So
putting words in your
it
mouth.
depends. Is the
Okay.
youth engaging in some sort of behavior that would rise to a criminal charge, but it's due solely to their mental health? Then if there are no charges and they're taken for an emergency evaluation, and then later the officer might apply charges, and then sometimes too, a parent might request charges, and then if they then are charged, then they come in and meet with the officer. And we've had kids in our program who are assigned to an officer, and depending on the additional services we assign to them after their initial meeting, we have kids that sometimes then have to go in for an evaluation, and then we work with the family, we work with crisis, we work with who we need to work with so that they can get the treatment they need without receiving the criminal charge. Sometimes some of the kids, for their program that might be put together for them for the 60 days they're in diversion, their whole program might be continue to see your therapist, don't pick up new charges, and then they're released from the program.
Sergeant Hafer, the rural experience, how does it happen? It's on.
So we have SROs, school resource officers, in every single school from elementary all the way to high school. Every campus has an SRO on site. That being said, our youth have direct contact with that officer pretty much on a daily basis. Hopefully that's in a good respect to them, and that helps out and builds that rapport. That being said, if it's a school-based offense and the school gets involved, they can handle it on their end of things, and our SRO is there for support. If it's something that does need to be charged on a juvenile referral, if one of our patrol deputies goes out to, let's say, a malicious destruction of property, that wouldn't be something that we would physically be bringing that juvenile in for. It would be the paperwork sent over to DJS saying, this is the juvenile referral, and then they handle it. So when I would send that report over the following morning after reviewing it, I would check our system and say, has this juvenile, do we have history with them? If we don't have any history, I will generally recommend a teen court disposition to keep it within that juvenile system, in-house for DJS. And then if it's something that we've had a repeat offender, repeat delinquent act with this child, then I would let DJS know that, and they would take it from that point to maybe confer with the state's attorney's office for, a petition.
I'm intrigued by a number of you have referred to the school setting. And can you just comment on what percentage of the encounters arise out of the school setting as opposed to non-school settings? I'm sure you don't have statistics at hand, but Captain, do you have a view about that?
I actually do
You
have
actually do.
some unofficial statistics. So Anne Arundel County, I want to say one thing, Carol is amazing. She manages all of our diversion, and without her, I think we would be lost. As far as, let's just use the calendar year of last year, unofficial, we received 243 referrals for diversion. That includes the Fresh Start program as well as the teen court. I do not want to discount teen court because, as Carol told me when I first came to the section, kids are harder on kids than adults are. Anyway, school-based, out of those referrals, 159 were school-based, 84 were not. So you're seeing more of SRO referrals at the schools we have SROs in. They had a total of 316 participants enrolled. 200 had successful completion, and 39 either did not successfully complete or were removed from the program. It's actually very good statistics. And it might sound like there's disparities, but again, people may still be enrolled in the program at the end of the school year, depending on what time and how far they are into their diversion.
Are the caseworkers working with the local care team in any of the jurisdictions?
So we only work in enroll. I don't think I understand your question.
Okay.
So our case managers are working within Anne Arundel County. So we're not. Are you asking me if we work outside of our jurisdiction?
No.
Oh, okay.
Outside of the officer case managers that you referred to, with whom do they interact for the provision of services?
So we have a partnership with Luminous Health Pathways. They run a 6-week alcohol, drug education and prevention program. We refer our youth there. We have classes that we run and programming that we run. And then we also have a partnership with the Partnership for Children, Youth, and Families. I always will get the order wrong.
Understood.
We partner with them and will refer youth to go through community conferencing with them as well.
Okay. Chief Reynolds, in Baltimore City, who are the major partners, if any?
Are you speaking in general, or this is still on diversion?
In general.
In general, so Baltimore City obviously is service rich. The mayor's office has many different offices underneath. African American male engagement, they have children and family success. MONSE, which is neighborhood safety engagement. I think one thing that I learned in going over to city-based focus is that it's much bigger than working with the state because it's so service rich. The issue I see though is, and I'm all about confidentiality. I've always been, it's hard to start early to get people to talk when everybody has to operate in silos. So that's what makes it difficult. We can't, if a youth were to be paper referred, we cannot call Moam and say, this would be a great kid for you all. Or we can't call Monty and say, we know there's an area over here, we're getting these arrested, because it's all confidential information. So while it's service rich, we have to wait to the point where we can share information, which then creates some lag time.
Sergeant Hafer, who are your partners in Caroline County? It's on.
Sorry. Again, being in a very rural area, we aren't as service rich. Our Caroline County Behavioral Health has recently established a mobile treatment and substance abuse. They call it the bus, that now services the high schools and is also working towards the middle school campuses to provide. Sorry, I lost my wording there. But the students can go and receive treatment. They can speak with a doctor. They can speak with a nurse practitioner. They can receive the services they need for their substance abuse treatment in confidentiality with those providers. So I think that's that's something unique to our area. I also work very heavily with the Child Advocacy Center, and that's more for problematic sexual behaviors when juveniles come through for.
Is that a local nonprofit?
Yes, yeah. So it's local to Caroline County, and we work very heavily with the mental health providers for, like I said, the problematic sexual behaviors and the clinicians to be able to evaluate specifically for sexual behaviors in that realm of things.
So let's just go down the line, Captain. What are you hearing from families? What are you hearing from families about what they want, what they're not getting? What are the gaps that you perceive?
So I'm going to defer to Carol for a lot of it.
Okay.
Because she's in these meetings with these families. But if you're referring to like the families of the juveniles that actually commit the crimes or the infractions, a host of issues come up when they have their intake meetings, when they have that interaction with everybody, because everybody, the family has to be there. There's no way for a juvenile to get through diversion without a family there, if that makes sense. And so I'm going to defer the rest to Carol, because she's amazing.
Carol?
So interestingly enough, I would say we get a significant portion of parents that come in and are fed up and they're like, do you have Scared Straight? Because that's what we want. Can you scare them straight?
Mm-hmm.
I'm always like, no, we don't do that. That actually didn't work. They're like, it works. So we do actually, a portion of it, we do take some of our youth on a tour of the Jennifer Road Detention Center. It is not Scared Straight. It's just for them, and we don't do it for every kid. So we don't do the same thing for every kid that comes through our doors because we're treating them individually. For some of the kids, it's eye-opening to see, and for some of them, especially our kids that are 17, we always have like a real talk with them. We're like, hey man, like you're so close to 18, and engaging in this behavior in 2 or 3 months is going to have such different results for you. So what is it we need to do to help you to change this behavior so this isn't happening? A lot of the parents are just, with a lot of the kids' issues, they're just beyond what they're able to deal with, and they don't know what to do.
Actually,
we see a significant amount of mental health.
that's a great segue actually to another question I think is important. You mentioned older teens, and I think we'd like to hear you all address the question, of the older teen, and what about LGBTQ teens, other teens having a particular demographic characteristic? Are there gaps? Are there special challenges? Do you encounter kids that you find it particularly difficult to service and divert?
The biggest issue we have are parents that are helpful to their children in the best ways they can for whatever barriers they have, if it's finances, times, if it's their own trauma, if it's their own, whatever their issues may be, or even parents that just come in and they don't believe in therapy and their child really needs therapy. And so it's the access to the services or the treatment that their kids need that the parents aren't on board with. And there are a lot of barriers we can overcome. Part of in some of the things we do on purpose in our unit. So all the officers in our unit drive unmarked cars. So if we want to put your kid in a program and you can't drive them, it's okay. We'll come pick them up. And so our officers will come pick them up. If we do a balance of fun activities and we do community service with them, things like that. A piece of our program too is to give them positive interactions with our officers. So a chance to like hang out and go and do things together. And again, it's in a car that's unmarked and things like that so that we can engage the kids and have them doing things that are positive for them. But in terms of addressing any gaps, again, there's just a lack of therapy services for kids, whether it's, kids that are part of LGBTQ, or there's also an issue in dealing with kids. A part of that community is if maybe they identify differently than the gender they were assigned at birth, and if the parent's not supportive of that. And so if they want to use a different name or they have different pronouns and the parents aren't supportive, so then for us, it's walking that line of when we're all together, being respectful of everyone. I just always make it clear if a child has a name they want to go by, that's the name I'm using. So it's things like that. A barrier with parents to me is always the hardest issue.
Does that sound familiar to you, Sergeant Haber?
Yes, the barrier with parents, and then I would also say the non-English speakers. Specifically for our community, we have a large Haitian Creole population down south, and then up north we have a large Hispanic community. And then it's the trust in the providers to get to the therapies and get on board with what we're trying to do to divert the behavior.
How about Baltimore City, Chief Reynolds?
So, as a police department, we don't offer services, but through our community policing unit, we are building out marginalized populations and what we can do to be supportive to those and connecting to resources. But I just wanted to go also back to the question about frustrations and parents being frustrated. It also has to deal with, we're asked, again, it's a hard day in their lives. We ask very personal questions. They get re-asked 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 times. They don't understand the acronyms, and we're not really cognizant of the fact that, they might need support at home. They might be off hours. They might be missing work. So I think all that comes into how does a parent react when they're addressing their youth and their choices.
What would make your job easier? Not that it could ever be easy.
Money, people, time.
I concur.
Go ahead, Carol.
Oh, I would like a team of clinicians in my office as well. I need more officers and I need clinicians. I need to be able to provide a connection to direct services that the kids we serve need.
If I can interrupt, and I might be putting you on the spot for this, Carol. If we got 100 kids in through diversion, and by that they've already committed the crime, how many of them do you think would need mental health services on average? All of them?
95%.
And that's the important part to remember moving forward is that, there's, and I think I had mentioned this already to you, sir.
Yeah.
The crime is not the problem. The crime is the symptom of the problem. So what are we going to be doing to address that problem? And mental health services is a huge part of it, addressing socioeconomic needs, things like that. But I couldn't, if we had a clinician in with diversion or even with youth programs. Just imagine how much more that could have, have the juvenile have a little bit more trust, open up in us, have that clinician be able to identify, okay, I think we need to take this path instead. Sorry.
And I would add from a child advocacy perspective, I see a desperate need for juvenile-based clinicians for sexual delinquency, substance abuse, and trauma. That being said, I had a case not too long ago where it took me 8 months to be able to get DSS to find a provider that would do a psychosexual evaluation on a 9-year-old juvenile delinquent that was actively going through a court case where a family member was victimized. So 9 months, that really put a damper on things. So the funding to have these clinicians readily available would be fantastic.
Wow, that's pretty amazing. What are you hearing from the community more broadly? What are when you meet with community groups, neighborhood groups, homeowners associations, what are they telling you? How are they experiencing young people? Start with you, Chief Reynolds, and we'll just come down the line.
I think it's clear. It's on the news a lot, so they're frustrated as well. There's a perception that things aren't being done, and I think that comes from a lack of understanding that when you arrest a child and you take them down to juvenile booking for detention, and whatever intake decision is made by DJS, the case isn't closed. That decision is made based on DJS's guidelines, and then the case will then follow. The victim will get a chance. The state's attorney will weigh in. DJS will do their intake. They'll assess their needs and their risks. They'll go to court, and then the court will make a decision based on the alleged offense. So will there be services, and can there be while they're going through the process? Yes, but I think the lack of understanding that's highlighted on an arrest and what the process actually means is part of the problem.
How about Anne Arundel? Carol?
I agree. I think that overall the public doesn't understand, and even when you say arrest or cite, people don't understand what happens to a kid when they break a crime or break a law. Because so the way our unit is structured, we're youth and victim engagement services. So I will deal with victims and with youth offenders, but there's a generally an overall perception of there's no accountability. When we put a youth who has been cited through teen court, and if I have to call a victim and I explain the process, they're like, well, I just want them held accountable. I mean, are they going to be held accountable? And I'm like, they'll be held accountable through the teen court process. And then, I explain, if you choose for this child's citation to be forwarded to the Department of Juvenile Services, here's what that process looks like. And they're like, oh, I had no idea. I'm like, yeah. So there's just an overall lack of awareness of what that process is. And to further highlight that, I've met with kids where they come in for our meeting, and I've explained to the parent, they come into the meeting, and the kid's like, am I going to juvie now? And I'm like, no, you got in a fight at school. You're not going to juvie for that. That's not even on the table. So there's just an overall misconception of the process, I think, for the majority of the public. If you're not involved in the criminal justice system, you don't have an awareness of the process.
Sergeant?
The accountability is also what I was going to highlight. And it's also, it's bridging that gap for the accountability and the understanding. And the hard part is when we go out on a call and we say, oh, well, the juvenile is under 10, our hands are tied, we really can't do anything. Whereas a couple of years ago, we would have been able to at least file that juvenile referral to take the next step. The public doesn't understand that. And then, well, you're not doing, the police aren't helping me. You guys aren't doing anything. And it's not us saying that we can't. It's the legislation that we're dealt at this point. But it would be nice to be able to say, well, here's this diversion program that I can make a phone call to DSS and say, hey, is there an at-home service that you guys could provide? I've done that for a couple of cases. But that's me going the extra step to do it. And not everybody knows about those options. So just And like I said, I'm a rural area, so these ladies are different where they have more services available to them.
Captain, you must interact with the public a lot more than they do.
Yes, there's a lot of frustration. Before I was in this job, I was a district commander, and there is frustration and thoughts from the community members themselves that, they don't see juveniles being held accountable. And that is an educational piece, because if they're of the age where, if they're 12 or above, or whatever it is, depending on what it is, we do everything we can. Whether to hold them accountable, whether it be diversion, whether it be a juvenile citation, whether it be transport to booking, which we try to avoid with juveniles. The other thing that I think a lot of people don't understand is that a juvenile citation is a criminal charge. Taking them down to booking isn't going to do anything more than what a juvenile citation would do. And so not taking immediate custody of a child and putting them into handcuffs, I think that the general public is thinking, well, they're just gonna get let go. And that's the furthest thing from the truth. And then also educationally, I know that for every juvenile citation, it is a criminal citation. But for everyone that comes through, if it's divertible, Carol or her people are on the phone calling saying, let me explain our process and can we get them through diversion, and trying to talk victims into allowing us to divert juveniles. So.
Okay, I'm going to open it up for questions. But first, again, briefly, what do you think this commission can do to improve the system? Chief?
I'll go back to my original point. If we could somehow revisit confidentiality when it's service needs that are going to be addressed, to open up doors for youth coming in at low-level offenses so they don't escalate. And we can connect them early. And when I mean connect, it's not just about that child, it's about the family as well. So if we can start at the beginning instead of waiting till the end when we, have to start getting services that are necessary.
So that's a change in the law you would like, you believe would be beneficial?
Yes.
Carol?
If this is something the commission can help with, but I don't know if it's seeking funding or seeking additional supports to provide clinicians, to provide mental health treatment. The lack of mental health treatment for kids is driving the majority of their behavior that rises to criminal behavior. And just overall, a lot of our kids' basic human needs are not being met. I teach a behavior regulation class for some of the kids on our programs, and just this week we did health and nutrition and exercise, and I had 2 kids out of 12 who said, yeah, they regularly eat breakfast. Like so I need these basic supports for kids so that they're getting what they need, so that they're not engaging in behavior that now the police department needs to try and help them with.
Sergeant?
So I prepared a little one-liner. So I think that what the commission can best help with is building the trust between the youth and the law enforcement officer. It requires a mutual understanding. Number one, that officers do need training in adolescent brain development, because that's the root of the problem. Again, as Captain said, there's a reason for this behavior. And while juveniles, they benefit from engaging with the police beyond enforcement action. And they need to see us as individuals rather than authority figures. So we need to, humanize the badge in that respect. And both of those concepts, I think, can be fostered by the commission through, number one, legislative review, and funding, if you're able to propose funding for those specific areas.
Captain, any last word on that?
I agree with you all. You're so smart. I'm so lucky to be sitting next to them. I will say that from an overall approach, it's not just the crime. It's not just mental health. It's every single aspect we really need to treat. And these kids need to be treated way earlier than the time that they first start to come into contact with the police department, in a normal police department sense. So whether that's having more SROs in schools, or whether that's providing more programs, community-based programs, that can address those poverty issues, or yes, there's some mental health in the community, as opposed to bring services to the community and don't make the community go to the services.
We have time for some questions. I'll bring the mic to you.
So I'm Donna Christie, and I serve on the commission representing the Maryland Consortium for Coordinated Community Supports. And so which is a long name, if our legislators could come up with easier names, that'd be great. I do want to share and kind of respond to your ask for more clinicians and more behavioral health supports, because that's exactly what the consortium is working on. And just to share some data with you and with the commission, there are currently 137 grants totaling $114 million under implementation. Over the past year, 1,380 community providers have been trained in evidence-based practices. Over 77,000 students have been served across all 24 districts. And in addition, 403 school staff have been trained in priority EBTs, evidence-based practices. 3,041 school staff have been trained in other. So it's coming. Part of the model that the consortium is growing is so that you'll have coordinated community supports, right? So you'll have a hub, every district, as a result of the grants that are coming. Every jurisdiction except for 2 in the state, those are Charles and I think Wacomico, will have a hub, so that, which is either your behavioral health department or your local health department, that would serve as a hub, and so you can refer and connect with clinicians there.
That's
So we
actually
are
really
trying
great.
to build
Yeah, that's
build
awesome.
that system, the behavioral health system.
Any response?
I think that's amazing.
Thank you.
So
I'll come back to that side of the room next. I need the exercise, as you can see.
Mr. Donahue. So this was great. This was so great. So thank you for all of this. One of the things that was really cool is it was a rare situation where we're like talking about in all of our meetings about data and like what we don't know, and that we don't know the things that start before DJS intake. We keep talking about that. And then Vinny comes in and gives us his book, so that when you're throwing out Anne Arundel County data, we're like, we've got Anne Arundel County data right here. And then you're talking about it. Now it's a little bit not the same, because like it's like the calendar year versus the fiscal year. But my curiosity, because this was such a powerful presentation, was about about 240 kids were diverted either through Fresh Start and Teen Court last year. And then in the fiscal year, so again, like not exactly the same, but like 1,300, 1,400 kids went to intake, where there are 1,400 complaints. And about half of those were diverted, like either resolved or informaled at intake. So I'm thinking about it, because as you were answering that last question about what you need, like part of my curiosity is it sounds like for the pre-arrest diversion, like kids are getting a lot of resources. You have this really high success rate. Like I'm really curious, like I would love it if none of those kids went to Vinny's intake if they were going to get diverted at intake. Like, so if those are kids who you're working with in diversion in Anne Arundel County with your services locally, I'm sort of curious how you see the distinction. Sorry, I know I'm going somewhere with this, but like the distinction between the pre-arrest diversion or like the Fresh Start and Teen Court versus those kids instead going to DJS intake. Because for every kid served in that program, about 3.5 of them are going to DJS intake instead. And half the time they're just getting diverted at intake at DJS. So I'm just curious how you think about the distinction between the two and that last question about resources and all that, like, what would it mean to just, could you imagine a world where you took more of the cases instead of them going to DJS?
Great question. Great question.
I can imagine that world.
That would be a
But-
great world.
But that world involves us having significantly more staff. So, and even for us, just the way staffing changes, right? So there's a piece of we need more staff to support more of that. Now we are attempting to divert between Fresh Start and Teen Core everyone that we can. And that's based on what our current parameters are. So if we have a youth, for youth to qualify for Fresh Start, they can have up to 2 priors. So if we have a youth who has more priors, then can, right? Also, for our diversion programs now, the requirement is to be an Anne County resident. Now, just because we are referring them to the Department of Juvenile Services does not mean they're a resident. It just feasibility of if you are a kid that lives in Baltimore City to engage you in the programs we have, and it doesn't work for us to divert out of county. I'm sorry, say again? Yes, and then it's also offense type. We are not diverting violent offenses. So
like I don't know, like misdemeanor person offenses, like the assaults that.
Yep.
Yes,
We
yes,
divert
we
those,
absolutely.
yes.
As long
We
as,
do.
as long as the victim has a say and agrees to the diversion, then we divert if possible.
Okay. I want to
Can I say one more thing though? I would also like to point out, there are some families that don't want to do it. So it's not a huge portion, but we get families that say no.
I want to recognize Aubrey, who has her hand up.
Thank you so much. This is like just such great and exciting work that you all are doing. Thank you so much for sharing it with us. One thing that I was thinking about, I operate a lot in the kind of intersection of child welfare and youth justice. And by the way, I'm the executive director for the Sarah and Neil Meyerhoff Center for Families, Children, and the Courts at the University of Baltimore School of Law. And we do a lot of work with kids who are having issues with chronic absenteeism and are at risk of going into both the juvenile justice or the child welfare system, as well as like the truancy court system. And so I'm curious from that kind of perspective, one of the things that we're often seeing is that there's a need and an opportunity to develop community strengths and practices that don't rely on professional capacity or like kind of, industrial complex, like the way in which we typically go about finding, professionals to kind of deal with some of the trauma and harm that the communities have experienced. And I'm wondering if there are any opportunities, either using, something like a credible messenger, but like kind of with more of a mental health perspective, or even using technology to kind of fill some of the capacity gaps that you all have experienced, or if you know of any other jurisdictions maybe that are doing something in that vein.
So I know, well, for Baltimore City, we are definitely engaged with several different credible messenger organizations. So I think that things are going really well with that. In fact, that's, I think, how MOAM really started and then branched off. But we find great success with that, with our youth. I know that what would be great if we could have one station down at Booking when the youth are coming through, because I think that's really a fresh and raw time for some of these youth to be in a police car, to be in handcuffs, to be tired, to be hungry, and to be arrested. So it would be great to start that kind of partnership there. But yes, to your question, we see value in it, and hopefully that can grow and expand. It takes a lot to be a person who's lived through it and came out on the other side, and then goes back to kind of pull and reach for the others to come up to.
Anybody else want to respond to that? I have a couple of other questions from our colleagues. Who else has a Fresh Start program, if you know, in the state? Any other jurisdictions?
I think we're the only jurisdiction with a pre-arrest diversion program.
Have you had any inquiries from any other jurisdictions?
Yes.
Okay.
So, and our chief has gone out and advocated and talked to other chiefs.
And there's a question about the role of school resource officers. Do you have any data regarding the impact? Do SROs result in more referrals, fewer referrals, more diversion, less diversion?
If I may,
Yes.
I don't have statistics on that, but what I do have is observable conduct, that I have witnessed personally. I do like to go out and visit my SROs and see what kind of impact they're having on the kids, and have personally witnessed SROs take a situation that was going to result in handcuffs and transporting and take it down to where they did not have to take custody of the juvenile. Juveniles were calmed down, things like that. I cannot state enough the importance of the SROs in making those connections with these kids, and giving them options and mentoring them and guiding them to be productive adults when the time comes. I wish I could get an SRO in every school everywhere, so.
I would absolutely concur with that. I would say at least half of our SROs either coach sports after school, are involved in some type of mentorship program, and they invite the rest of us to come in and make those connections with the students as well.
Well, I'd like to share, a couple of years ago, there was going to be legislation, I can't remember if it was legislation or if it was just county-based, where they wanted to pull our school resource officers out of the buildings. And at that time, it was predates my time, but I know the unit did it. We had an advisory council, and the teens from around the county that were a part of this council were like, you're not taking our SROs from us. And while you're at it, could you give us more? And they went to the Anne Arundel County Public School Board meeting as a group and shared their experiences, and were like, no, we don't want you to take our school resource officers from us. But what we would like is for their uniforms to be changed. And so it was student voices that propelled the decision that our school resource officers wear the softer uniform. They were really clear about what they wanted in their schools, and that they felt safer and had connections with their school resource officers.
Mr. Secretary.
Yeah, I'm not anti-SRO, and I've chaired a commission in New York where we had 5,000 SROs in the school, so there was just a ton of them. And I've seen some really good trainings that have helped SROs de-escalate and do all those kinds of things. But just relative to Maryland, just data-wise, because I did pull a little data while we were sitting here, referrals go down over the summer. They consistently are at their lowest in July and August. I do not believe children commit less crime in July and August. I believe they get arrested more because they're in a building with someone who can arrest them. If we were in buildings with someone who could arrest us, we would get arrested more. So I don't know whether they commit more crimes in those buildings or not. I suspect they commit less crimes at school, but we get more referrals. So.
Well, speak for yourself, but a judge did get arrested in her own courtroom the other day. So you never know. Susan?
So, one of the problems has always been that unlike people that have money, they can, if their kid has a problem, they can go out and buy the services. And the problem is the kids you're dealing with, they don't usually come from families where they can do that. And so they're dependent on a system that they have no way of understanding. They would go to juvenile services because they think that they're going to take care of their kid, because they don't know how to access mental health service. I mean, they can't get them. And so I love this idea of a hub, but does anybody know about it? Is there a navigator? Is there, so, I mean, you basically, when I represented kids, I knew where to get services for every kid. But, you know, I did it for 50 years. It's complicated. And so it seems to me that's a real, how do they get connected?
What's your reaction?
I think parental education is a large piece of it, and again, bridging that gap. Just as parents don't know what services are available, the parents also don't know the activities and potential criminal activity that their children are engaging in. Specifically, I speak to like a digital age of things. Parents don't know what their kids are doing on cell phones, which in my experience, 90% of crimes come from some type of digital device, and the parents say, "Oh, I didn't know that they were doing that." So, I think it's parental education.
Well, this has been a rich discussion. We can't thank you enough for being here and sharing with us. I'm going to give each one of you 45 seconds to close us out. Captain, starting with you.
Let me start my timer. No, I'm just kidding. I'm excited about what you said, ma'am, so I cannot wait for that. And the only other thing is, again, treat the problem. Don't treat the end result. That would be if anybody can take anything out of that and provide resources to the community that will treat those problems, I think we could see a vast improvement.
Sergeant.
Just a big thank you for taking our perspective and input. And just so everybody understands, and I can speak for all of us, I believe, none of us want the situation of a juvenile being in the back of a police car. We want what's best for that juvenile to be able to decrease the recidivism and create that positive outcome for that child.
Well said. Carol?
Great. I'm going to take this time because there's one other significant piece that is needed for kids, and it's probably the same in our jurisdiction, and I know it's the same in Baltimore. We need more alternative learning environments. Probably the majority of the kids I work with functioning in a high school with 2,000 to 2,500 other kids does not work for them. And so whoever was speaking about working on truancy, so many of our kids just like they can't function in school based on a variety of issues, or everybody, a ton of bullying, a ton of just school is not their focus. But we need something constructive for them to be doing. They need learning environments that support them. And our huge high schools is not it. I don't know if that's a problem you all can solve, but if you can, I would appreciate it. Thank you.
Chief?
Thank you. I should have said this first. I'm not a sworn member, so I know I'm not going to take away from Detective Sergeant or Captain at BPD. That said, thank you for the invite. And again, like you had said, listening to our perspective, just an invite if anybody wants some more information, wants to come to one of the districts, or talk to our neighborhood community officers firsthand. They're the ones who really deal with the youth and families. You're welcome to reach out, and we'll make that happen.
Ditto.
Thank you very much. Let's give our panelists a warm thank you. I think we have a couple of quick housekeeping matters to attend to. Suki?
Very quickly, probably same place, same time on June 12th. That is my one announcement, besides thanking you, Secretary, for these beautiful data resource guides. That's really it. Thank you all so much.
I'm giving you back your 2 minutes. Thank you all for showing up. Thank you all for showing up virtually. Let's keep the work going.
Thank you.
That was great.
Being in a room with people
That comes through for you.